I had to bet on myself. Everything was there to start a business. I just didn't know how to make wine. The most scarce thing in the world is your time, and Bitcoin's absolutely scarce. I would say 50% of my sales this year have been in Bitcoin specifically, but 100% to Bitcoiners. The Bitcoin itself is not what those companies that are just dipping their toe in are looking at. They want more sales. You have to view that as boosting the system. You have to view that as use it or lose it when it comes to Bitcoin's ability to scale. I was out there with a Bitcoin preferred sign for years and would get maybe one person a week.
Medium of Exchange is sponsored by Polaris Payments. Let's face it, for now, businesses still need to accept fiat and credit cards. Polaris Payments helps with all your credit card processing needs using a consultative approach. Think of Polaris like a performance coach, helping take your business to the next level when it comes to accepting all forms of money. For more information about Polaris Payments, visit polarispayments.com. Now let's get back to the show. Hello and welcome to the Medium of Exchange podcast. Today, Jack and I are excited to welcome Ben Justman. Ben is a winemaker and Bitcoiner and the founder of Peony Lane, a boutique winery that accepts Bitcoin. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to talk about how Bitcoin's changing the world as far as commerce goes.
For sure. So, Ben, I'd love to hear a little bit just about your story. What was the exact moment that you realized you had to start Peony Lane?
I was in my, I was like 25 and kind of floundering as a geologist, realizing that there wasn't a career path for me using my degree. And knew kind of in my heart that I needed to be an entrepreneur, but had gone the geology route just to give it a shot. And really was just in a soul searching phase of what do I want to do with my life? And I grew up on a farm where my dad grew all his own food and had planted a few acres of Pinot Noir grapes and had been making wine from it as a bit of more of a hobby. There was a couple of years of him selling wine. And I had never really considered that as a business option. And one day we were just on the phone talking about life. He knew what phase I was at. And he's like, maybe you should just start the winery, start making wine. And it was really just the perfect layout of opportunity where I figured my dad could teach me how to make wine. He was a hobby winemaker, but had some sommeliers really like his wine. He made low intervention wine, so that's a lower bar to entry as far as understanding what you're doing from the beginning, I thought. And I had the infrastructure to start as a hobby winemaker and scale up, and then he loaned me the money to get going. So everything was there to start a business. I just didn't know how to make wine and I didn't know how to run a business, but I knew I had to bet on myself. So kind of just went for it and had 2 years to figure out how to make wine before I had to figure out how to sell wine. So it was really just I need to bet on myself and everything's here for this. So, it may not be what I want to do my whole life, but I gotta do this now.
Was that hard? With something like software, you can iterate every day. Something like growing grapes, you got one shot per season, right?
Yeah. So, winemaking is it's continuous. And I guess the wine is truly never done until you drink it. But there's a point, you have basically the whole year and to make the wine, get it where you want it. But there's a intense, 2-week period harvest to ferment to get it in barrel. Most intense. And about a week, man, I would even just a couple hours into making wine my first time after I had invested my entire life savings into this. I kind of realized my dad didn't know what he was doing as a winemaker and that I was going to have to teach myself. So, that's quite the kick in the pants when you realize it's all on you and you've just bet everything. You better figure it out. And that first year, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I made solid wine. All the wine I made, I messed up some of the wine, but the reason I messed it up was because I didn't know if it was good or not. And I was moving towards the bottling phase and I just kept opening the barrels and being like, hey, try this. Is it good? Is it good? Is it good? And that extra air exposure ruined a lot of my wine when it would have already been really good. The wine that did survive won some awards in Colorado, and so that gave me confidence. But like I didn't start selling that wine for another year. I didn't have enough to really make it at that time, so I was working over the winters. I was doing restaurant jobs at ski towns, and that kind of gave me a slow intro. It was like, yeah, I still have a job, but I also have the winery. That does mean part of the year I'm working two jobs. Um, but I don't know. Over time, it's like it's just kind of the way I do it is super hands off. My goal in winemaking is to let the grapes express themselves, which means I get out of the way as much as possible. And I've refined my techniques over the years and gotten better at the little bit I do to make better wine. But yeah, it is. You kind of get one shot every year, and right as I was about to I made my second vintage, and right after we harvested that, before I'd ever sold any wine, we had a hard frost, and every grape in Colorado got frozen out. So I was banking on my estate Pinot Noir kind of being my it wine, and then I had an entire vintage where I couldn't make it. So there's kind of the smoothing over of wine making is like you have years and years of stock eventually. That was me just getting started, so I didn't, and you can kind of use that to smooth over bad years. So like you make a lot on good years, you make a little bit less on bad years once you're fully stocked up, and that papers over the farming variability because there's so much variability in farming. And it's I think the coolest part though is really just like becoming much more attached to the land I grew up in, and this business turning into a Bitcoin business, which was not the plan from the beginning.
What was the hardest day you had as a winemaker or entrepreneur?
Man, I had some crazy panic attacks when I was first, maybe my second vintage of winemaking, because the first time I was doing it, it was really hard. I was commuting from Denver, so I'd work 40 hours in 4 days and then drive 5 hours that night, work three 12-hour days and drive back. And it was just continuous for a month of winemaking because that's when the grapes ripen. And I knew I wasn't going to have any wine to sell, so it's not like I could quit my job. And that was hard, but that was just get the work done. But the second year of winemaking adds to the complexity because now not only do I have all this winemaking from the first year, but now I have to, as I was saying, I was stressed about, is this wine good? I just committed a year, 2 years really, because I've just started making all this second batch, and I have to commit to this wine being like quote unquote done, moving it into the bottle, and make all the wine the second time. So bottling and finishing and everything is like a whole added other bit of complexity with tons of just like rolling processes. Like I need barrels in 2 days to be able to put the wine that's done fermenting into. So I need to bottle right now, which means prepping. And there was just so many days where it's like these constant like, oh shit, I forgot to do this thing. I have to do this right now. It's 9 p.m. Or I like can't, or I just like ruin all my wine. So there's just like constant thinking of things. I was taking some CBD at the time to help with the stress, and I guess I overdid it and had a just crazy panic attack. And that was kind of the nadir of intensity. And every year it gets a little bit less, but at the same time, the grapes do have a mind of their own, and I can only plan so far out. So during winemaking season, it's like once I pick grapes, get them fermenting, I know I generally have 2 weeks. I know what I generally have to do in those 2 weeks, but I don't know exact days, especially for getting labor, having specific things done and ready. I never know exactly. So like I can plan 2 days out, maybe one day, but generally in winemaking season, I have an entire month of rewriting my weekly schedule every single day, and everything changes for the entire week. So there's maybe 1 to 2 months a year where it's absolutely insane, and then the rest of the year it's a lot more manageable.
And I think the process that you're describing is so interesting because a lot of people enjoy drinking wine, whether it's as a glass for dinner or, a meeting with friends at a happy hour. But the actual like steps that go into getting a bottled, Pinot Noir that you're servicing to customers to your point, it's a real difficult process, and you've basically just described all the proof of work that goes into selling what you would call a good bottle of wine. But my question for you then is, what else goes into besides just the taste of what makes a good bottle of wine, and what are you able to do to really add your own kind of unique brand to the Peony Lane wine, and be able to sell it to people to the point where you're winning rewards, like you said.
Like I said, my biggest thing is kind of getting out of the way. So my philosophy is start with good grapes, and as long as I'm a good steward, I'm going to end up with good wine. There's some little things I can do, like within the barrel aging, but ultimately, I'm kind of positioning Peony Lane as I went through a health journey throughout this whole process of like, if I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, if I'm gonna like bet on myself, everything's on me. And my health was not to the point where like I was able to actually get things done. And in doing that, I kind of realized how much different I felt in after drinking my wine versus any other alcohol, and started learning about how there's so many additives in wine that my philosophy initially was, yeah, I want to make natural wine, wild fermentation, no additives, but it kind of was like, I don't know how to do anything different because that's what my dad did. And then now that I'm um, educated on the health aspects, that's a big portion of what I want to do. So I want to create wines that leave people feeling good afterwards. It's a nice buzz, and then it's a clean come down. You don't feel gross the next day. And I think that's not unique for me, but like that is a secret sauce of just like, I'm not trying to manipulate these wines. I'm not trying to create anything that is different from what the grapes generally intended. I'm a bit of a translator. I hold its hand throughout the process. But yeah, my goal is to get out of the way as much as possible. And the wine I'm making is from a pretty unique area. I'm in the highest elevation wine region in North America, and the only place in Colorado you can grow Pinot. So for comparison's sake, to give context for that, if you go out to California and you go wine tasting in a high elevation region, they're going to maybe be like 1,500 feet above sea level. I'm at 5,600 feet above sea level. And I also buy grapes from nearby in another AVA that's 4,500 feet above sea level. And so what I'm creating is just so unique in the wine world. I mean, there are wines in the Andes up to like, 15,000 feet. That's crazy. But for North America, what I'm doing is pretty unique, and that tends to show itself in the wine.
Yeah, and I love that you kind of talked about your health journey and all that type of, additional education that went into both creating your wine as well as figuring out how you're able to operate as an entrepreneur. And I think one of the things that has started to bubble up in the social zeitgeist, I think that's the right word there, is a lot of what you were describing of additives in just all of our food. And that was something that I never even realized, especially when thinking about different, like, whether it's alcohol or just processed food, really up until the last few years. And I think that conversation has become very very much a selling point for people. And I remember when we were talking a few months back, you were describing like the different types of wines that are on the market now and what goes into them. And I would just love for you to kind of run through like, what are some of the things that are going into maybe the average bottle of wine that people are buying at the store that we're not aware of.
Yeah, so let me talk about wine specifically, and then maybe alcohol in general. With wine, one of the things I realized early on when I was getting my first labels is you don't really think about there being an ingredients list on wine. There isn't one. You're not required to have one in the United States, and there's 72 improved ingredients that you can add to your wine to manipulate it and not have to say anything on the label. So really, it just, first I thought wine was not transparent because of like the classism and the jargon and just like elitism that you kind of get when you enter the wine world. And then I realized that it's also, there's so much hidden behind the scenes in what's actually put in the wine. And as I've done my research, there's all these different people that are like, oh yeah, I get headaches because of the sulfites. I get headaches because of the tannins. I get headaches for all these different reasons. And basically the conclusion I've come to is you don't know why you're getting headaches. There's no specific thing that's telling you I get headaches because of this. Some people are going to be sensitive to high sulfites. Some people are sensitive to other things. But ultimately, it's something in that wine that is giving you a headache. And since there's no transparency, there's really no way of knowing. But if you drink a wine without any of that stuff and low sulfites, you're going to feel good, more likely than not. So it could be any of those things.
What is the purpose of adding them?
So I have a relatively small winery, and that means I can touch every barrel. I really can understand what's going on in each barrel because each barrel is different. And in a large winery, you're producing so much that you have wine in these massive tanks. You really are creating something to taste. You want to create, if you're making a Cab Sauv, you want it to taste like a Cab Sauv should. And like, I reject that is a thing, that a Cab Sauv should taste like this. But if you're making large produced wine, you want wine to taste a specific way, to get a specific score from a specific rating agency, to be able to sell better on the shelf, to be able to say, this is a 95-point Cab. And that is the difference of like hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, depending on your scale. So you get a winemaker that studied at UC Davis and makes a wine specifically to this taste. There's some year-to-year variation, but the additives give more control to the winemaker and cut down that year-to-year variation. And like, you're cutting off the top in quality and you're raising the floor. And for big businesses, raising the floor is what matters. So that's a big reason. I think a lot of people, like I said, sulfites are a big one. And then the one that you see, like the eye-popping one, is this thing called Mega Purple. That's basically just this grape concentrate made from grape, but it adds flavor. It adds color to wine. So you're kind of getting, it doesn't take much. It's maybe not specifically bad for you, but if someone's using that, they're probably using a bunch of other things, and you don't know what they're using. You don't know which of those things is giving you problems. So I think in the health sphere, when it comes to alcohol in general, I hear a lot, especially from Bitcoiners, that alcohol is a shitcoin. And like, there's no denying that alcohol in itself is not good for you, and it's addictive. And so how can you say it's good? Well, when you realize that it's like a lot of the things in alcohol that are making you feel bad and not the alcohol itself, you can kind of trap like, okay, what is the alcohol doing that's making me feel bad? And what are all these other additives do that make me feel bad? And so alcohol inhibits your ability to regulate blood sugar, so you're more likely to get blood sugar crashes. So if your blood sugar peaks and then drops super quick, you're going to feel basically a hangover. And people associate that with alcohol because I was drinking, now I feel bad. In all these other alcohol, like, in like manipulated red wine, mixed drinks, beer is going to increase your blood sugar. All those things also have a bunch of other additives to them, but it's the blood sugar crash that's going to hurt you a lot. And with red wine, there is less sugar, and I'm forgetting the exact chemical, but something that helps kind of regulate that within your body a little bit. Also, just minutia, because it's not like the biggest thing, but I tend to say if you're on a date, what you want to order is like a good red wine that doesn't have a ton of additives, because it has this other chemical that we can look up later, the name, that reduces your body's ability to remove testosterone from your bloodstream. So it doesn't boost your testosterone, but it stops your body from lowering it, which causes an elevated level while you're drinking. But yeah, it's really like, look, if you can drink a nice bottle of wine with good friends over a good meal, that's a pretty like life elevating experience that you're not going to be able to quantify on the numbers. But I think it's beneficial to life when used appropriately. And if you can't like for some people's balance with alcohol, the right number is 0. Absolutely. But if you can use alcohol in a positive way to kind of elevate experiences and drink to enhance your life, not to escape it, I think you can have a positive health benefit from it.
Oh, 100%. And one of the reasons why I was super excited to talk to you as well is I'm currently reading a book called Drunk by Edward Slingerland. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. And it talks about the history of alcohol and like civilization basically getting to where we are today because of alcohol, wine, beer. There's a whole, I learned throughout this book that like ancient civilizations, they were growing wheat and corn for alcohol before even they were using it for bread. And similar with wine, like this is the whole beer before bread theory and all that type of stuff. And to what you were saying is when you are using this, alcohol as a tool in a sense to either raise an experience and help establish trust between people and build relationships, it can lead to some really almost, crazy experiences from in the realm of creativity and in the realm of collaboration. So I think that what you're saying is totally valid. And I also hear the other side of people who are very anti-alcohol and all that type of stuff, which they have some valid arguments as well, because you're right, for some people the tolerance should be 0. But I think the reason why I'm kind of going on that tangent here is because I do want to bring it back to your journey of discovering Bitcoin and a Bitcoin business and how you've been able to weave this industry that has been seen as, to your point, more of an elitist type of industry that's not for everyone in terms of how we can understand different wines. But then you're really taking a grassroots approach to selling to Bitcoiners and selling to a community that is looking to build on these experiences. So I guess the question here is, can you talk us through how you discovered Bitcoin, and then 2, how you discovered selling Bitcoin or selling wine to Bitcoiners?
Yeah, I feel like I got lucky discovering Bitcoin, but I was also ready for it. I was helping all my friends with their personal finances, like getting them the right bank account, saying like, you have use a credit card, everything's 2% off. If you're like, if just pay it off, teaching them to budget and everything. Because I'd just been really into that personally for years, but was listening to NPR economics podcasts and was deep in the Keynesian world. And when I started the winery, I moved home, and while I moved home because I had a year to kill, and my dad wanted to build a house. So I was building a house with my dad, and I moved in with a friend from high school who I considered to be really smart. And we would just talk geopolitics, and he was a Bitcoiner. So he kind of just turned me on to it. I started listening to podcasts, and I don't know, got sucked in because I was already super, super interested in it. And then that same friend, basically, like I was getting my news from Reddit and Cointelegraph, and he would know things. Like I'd be like, dude, did you see this? He's like, yeah. And then list like a bunch of other things about it that I didn't know. And I just got tired of being late. So he was getting his information on Twitter. So I got on Twitter. And then I'm kind of a loudmouth. So I started posting what I was doing and finding Bitcoiners, went to the Bitcoin conference in Miami and was like, wow, look, I know I'm crazy, but like these people are also my people. And that was kind of eye-opening. That with the Bitcoin Twitter community was just like, these people are awesome. I just want to start connecting with them more. And through that experience, Bitcoiners just started asking me to buy wine with Bitcoin. And, I'm a Bitcoiner, and obviously I want to sell wine. So you say yes. And that just kind of continued growing naturally for a while without, like, I didn't ever think it would become anything. And now it's my entire business. So it's really kind of just this perfect marriage of like Bitcoiners want high quality products. They focus on health and they understand the low time preference of wine, and are like wine's kind of turned out to be a really perfect product for this. And Bitcoiners turned out to be a really perfect customer for me. Not to mention, like, I just want to spend more time with Bitcoiners and don't like, that's my people. Why do business with anyone else if that's enough to sustain myself? So it's kind of grown from there. And seeing the Bitcoin world kind of grow in a like morph within the last 4 years has been really cool because more and more businesses are popping up that accept Bitcoin. And like, in bull markets, there's always little bits of it, but it feels much more real now. And I feel like Bitcoiners as a customer base is a much more real thing now, because before it's like, okay, cool, I accept Bitcoin, but there's not enough people in Bitcoin that care enough to do that. But now I think that there's large enough, if there's enough people for me to sustain my entire business on it, there's enough people for larger businesses to want to speak to that customer niche, because it doesn't take anything. If they're aligned generally, it doesn't take much to align with Bitcoiners without alienating any of your other customers. So it's an underserved niche of people that are hungry for alignment.
Ben, are you saying that by, hanging your hat saying I accept Bitcoin, that has created so much new business that at this point almost all of your revenue is coming in through Bitcoin?
I would say 50% of my sales this year have been in Bitcoin specifically, but 100% to Bitcoiners.
Oh, wow. So your business has really grown a lot to that Bitcoin community.
So I started out doing like farmers markets, and that was a summer thing. It was, it's good income. I'm in Aspen, Telluride, like, rich ski towns. There's a lot of money coming in, but those customers are not really continuous. They see you at the farmers market, they buy, and it's not my hometown, so it's not like they're coming to see me afterwards. And that was good money. It was always a means to an end, but I thought the means to the end was going to be a tasting room in my hometown. And it started like Bitcoiners were my first year 0%, then 10%, then 50%, and then last year 75%. All basically.
How do you know that they're Bitcoiners when someone makes an order?
Well, no one that's not on Bitcoin Twitter follows me, so that's where all my orders are coming from.
That's awesome.
That's a good way to track it.
It's just been, I mean, I'm like loosely tracking it, but I'm like, who else is buying wine? There's some people, but like that's such a small percentage, just because I'm not talking to them. So it's enough that it's like, look, this is a great group of people that really appreciates my product, and I align with them. So I just want to point towards them. And, if my business ever grows to the point where I'm too big for that, I can make the decision either to scale back or grow beyond it. But ultimately, like, I'm building a business that I want to do for foreseeably the rest of my life. And that's more the target than getting super rich. And I just think like, if I get super rich, it's because of Bitcoin. It's not because of the business. And the business goal is not to get super rich. And so I can build something that's a lot more sustainable for me specifically, than being forced to continuously grow to keep up with money printing and costs going up and everything. So I'm kind of given this beautiful space to be a boutique winery, make high quality wines, and sell it to the specific people who appreciate it the most, as opposed to being forced to constantly find new customers.
I feel like the values of Bitcoin have created a much healthier entrepreneur that you are today, having low time preference. It sounds like having this sort of stress-free, low time preference mentality has created sort of a settled, confident, peace-of-minded entrepreneur. I almost feel like the definition of an entrepreneur is like stressed out, overwhelmed, and just trying to keep up. And you have such a beautiful presence to your entrepreneurial journey with this long time horizon. Do you feel like that's mostly come from Bitcoin, having that perspective, or from being a winemaker? Or,
growing up on a farm and having a dad that was pretty low time preference, studying geology, learning about long-term time preferences. I think I was ready for it, and I was big into skiing and going fast and adrenaline. And I think starting the winery, building a house, and finding Bitcoin all kind of in the same 1 to 2 year span just really pushed me into the low time preference world. That has helped my health and my relationships, everything. But I think going to your what is an entrepreneur point, and like our stereotype is all these other things. I think that's more of a fiat system phenomenon where if you start a business, you have to grow. And if you don't grow, you die. And Bitcoin is kind of like this first mover advantage that you can just hold on to. Like you start stacking Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is, I mean, Bitcoin grows like a tech startup, you know. So if you can just build a profitable business and take your savings in Sats, you're able to survive in a way that you can't in the fiat system. So yeah, it's kind of a new paradigm for businesses. Like what I do is definitely not for everyone. And if you're in like a tech software business, I think that still, like, if you're not growing, you're dying to a degree. But for smaller businesses, it's definitely a lifeline to be able to succeed. And I mean, when you think about the fiat system, it centralizes. You need to get bigger. Power centralizes, and with Bitcoin, power decentralizes to a large degree. So yeah, smaller businesses are generally going to be able to better thrive in at least the Bitcoin future that I perceive.
Ben, where do you envision this movement of business owners like yourself starting to accept this new form of money? Where do you envision this movement going? Like as we, over the next like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
So it starts on the margins, right? It starts with, I don't want to say it starts with me, but like it starts with people like me that are a bit smaller businesses. Think about Mandrick going back a decade selling baklava for Bitcoin. It's pretty niche. There's not a ton of Bitcoiners to support you. And it slowly gets bigger and bigger. I mean, now I know of like large cattle companies that accept Bitcoin, and that's revolutionized their business. And a lot of people in the health sphere accept Bitcoin. I think that's great. Like, so we're seeing these like value aligned businesses accept Bitcoin. And I think what they're realizing is not only are Bitcoiners a bigger customer niche, but they're also a wealthy customer niche and will spend outsized, that are also extremely loyal. Because why would I buy from a company that makes the same product but doesn't accept Bitcoin versus one that helps the Bitcoin mission that we're all so powerfully aligned with? So that's like, easy choice, right? And then we're starting to like touch into bigger businesses. So we have single entrepreneurs, and then maybe smaller niche health brands. And then now I think Shake and Steak is like a really big test into the new paradigm, and it's really just happening now. So we'll see. But like their switch to tallow instantly, I and tons of other health focused people are like, oh, well, I'm going to eat Steak and Shake for sure if I'm going to get a burger. And I think that now adding on to all the Bitcoiners that maybe don't quite understand like the benefits of tallow and seed oils, because that's not like, not every Bitcoiner has gone down a health rabbit hole. But I really think it's like this powerful customer base that, like I said, is extremely loyal and outsized wealthy. And like if Bitcoiners were powerful enough to have an influence on the presidential election, they're big enough to target as a customer niche. And yes, it makes a bigger difference for smaller companies, but I think we're seeing larger and larger companies see the opportunity. And it takes a bit of, I mean, I assume the founder of Steak and Shake is like at this point orange pilled. I mean, there's Bitcoin on the web page, but like I think that there will be an element of like just curious people that if you can get slightly exposed to this customer demographic, it's just, I follow the money. I lean in where these customers are, and maybe they get orange pilled that way. Maybe it's just the gains during a bull market, but like it's this kind of symbiotic relationship where it's the perfect customer for a lot of businesses, and these customers are dying to support businesses that support their movement and spend Bitcoin, because Bitcoin doesn't succeed unless it's also a medium of exchange. So it's I don't know, it's a really cool time right now, and I think it's really like this kind of paradigm shifting moment where the scale of Bitcoiners is big enough to support lots more businesses than it was previously.
Medium of Exchange is sponsored by the Bitcoin Payments Advisor. If you own or run a business and you'd like to accept Bitcoin but don't know how, the Bitcoin Payments Advisor can help. From specific software recommendations and accounting implications to training employees and marketing so your customers know you accept this new form of payment, the Bitcoin Payments Advisor can help simplify your journey in accepting Bitcoin for your business. Check out bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Again, that's bitcoinpaymentsadvisor.com. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm going to be following closely with that Steak and Shake release, which I think it's in 2 or 3 days, but probably past when this podcast comes out, is how that implementation actually goes through. I don't believe they've announced that yet. But then the other piece of it that I find really interesting to see, because all of what you just said around the Bitcoiners wanting to support these types of businesses, is Steak and Shake is mostly like self-serve kiosk in terms of how you like order the food and check out. So that puts the way to pay back on the consumer. So if I'm someone who is and I lived in Indiana for a little bit and went to Steak and Shake quite a few times, I can now pay in Bitcoin, and there's no additional training that goes into all the employees at the registers that is required, because some of these invisible costs that go into adding a Bitcoin standard into your business, even if the gains will far outweigh those, people don't want to take that short-term risk. And I think that's one of the things that I really am inspired about your story, is how you were able to see through kind of that risk and all that type of stuff of you're taking payments in Bitcoin. Isn't that volatile? Isn't that magic internet money? What's going on there? And just to ask further is like, what is your thought on some of the short-term kind of, quote unquote volatility that comes with adopting a Bitcoin standard, and what would you advise to more of those smaller businesses or medium-sized businesses that are thinking about taking Bitcoin as payments, but just don't know how to get over that mental barrier?
So I want to step back to something you said at the beginning of that is I never was into orange pilling or trying to get brick and mortar businesses to accept Bitcoin, because I was out there with a Bitcoin preferred sign for years and would get maybe one person a week that would see that and say something that wasn't like derogatory or question like that new, so Steak and Shake is also a test in the fact that it's a brick and mortar business. It's not in this place where all the Bitcoiners can come. So we've been in this, it's been easy if you're online selling to Bitcoiners, I can talk to every Bitcoiner in the United States. That's a large group of people, but in each town, there's probably a couple, and so we'll see if that makes if it makes a huge difference. But specifically, then you train the employee and then no one spends Bitcoin and that employee forgets how to do it. And you're like, why did I waste this time? I'm not going to touch Bitcoin for another few years because that was stupid. It was a waste of time last time I did. And so additionally, I think that attracting Bitcoiners is not specifically about the number of Bitcoin payments you get, because I totally understand that there's, some people will go through the hoops of spin and replace on Strike. Awesome. Some people will just spend Bitcoin, but there are a lot of people who, credit cards are easy and it's, a 30-day, maybe 60-day, depending on the time of your transaction, interest-free loan. So totally understand, you get 2% back. So totally understand putting things on credit cards. And it's more to me about attracting that additional customer than specifically getting a ton of Bitcoin payments. So if you measure your success in adopting Bitcoin on number of payments, I think you're missing the larger picture. When it comes to volatility, I think it really volatility matters so much your first 4 years into it, and then you're so much more protected from that going forward because your cost basis is presumably lower. And I went all in at both tops of the last cycle, and that killed me. I was just trying to stack as many sats as possible. It was going to go up forever, and felt like I was late. So made some bad financial decisions, but I got Bitcoin. So it was a good financial decision in the long run, but it's going to hurt in the short term. So really, you do need to really take a long-term approach on it, and adopting Bitcoin as like if you want to call it a treasury asset, if you try and get rich quick from it, you're going to get screwed. So, or most people will at least. And I think if you don't, you're probably going to get a big head on your shoulders and get screwed down the line from not learning your lesson early. So it's not, it's hard. Like it's hard to have your money as volatile as Bitcoin, even if the volatility is up. There's a Western wear company that I've become friends with that we're being a partner of mine are trying to get on the Bitcoin standard, introduce him to Bitcoiners because he produces a really high quality product that I think Bitcoiners would love. And my friend paid him in Bitcoin, and then it dropped down from 100 to 80K. And he's like, I need this money. Like I need to buy more shirts. I need more inventory. And it went down 20%. Like that sucks. And so, yeah, there's an element of like that first little bit, does it go up? Does it go down? Because that's when they're really paying attention. And it's just kind of, you want to pique that interest. You want it to be more sales, not get rich on Bitcoin when you're talking to people like this. And ultimately, it's a bit of escaping the rat race. We think of entrepreneurs as escaping the rat race because they're not fiat, like they're not getting paid a wage. And so they have the power to outpace fiat depreciation, but ultimately like they're on a treadmill as well. Their treadmill is I buy product, I sell product to buy more product, and my costs are always going up. Therefore, my prices are always going up, and I'm always trying to find more consumers. So if you can get them to kind of see it as like, hey, you're on this wheel and prices are always going to go up. Your margins are always going to get squeezed. What you kind of need to do is start exiting that system and just putting like 1% of your sales or every sale that comes in on Bitcoin when it's not a huge amount at the beginning. Just keep that in Bitcoin. That's like you're taking a step off the hamster wheel to slow it down. And eventually, when you get 4 years in or you have enough Bitcoin or whatever, you can kind of fully get off and just approach your business from a more long-term perspective of like, what do I want to build? Do I want to grow? Do I not want to grow? And without that, you're still stuck in a fiat hamster wheel and there's volatility and Bitcoin's not going to get you rich right away. But it's a way to like just exit that system that is constantly debasing your work in a way that like you can still grow beyond it. So I see it as like small steps for entrepreneurs. You don't want to you want to invest back into your business. This is why you're doing it. You have a business to do a business, but it's kind of unseen and like, you could put numbers on it projecting out, but like it's a bit unquantifiable, the ability to step off that hamster wheel and start slowing it down. And it takes a lot of time.
So you said focus more on Bitcoiners more than payments, but you also said Bitcoin doesn't exist without medium of exchange. Tell me more.
Well, I think as like 50% of my sales are in Bitcoin. So I say that with a bit of like a focus on Bitcoiners because you need the cash flow, you need the more customers, and the further you get into Bitcoin, maybe you start discounting for Bitcoin, you start charging that fiat card fee to push people towards Bitcoin. Like, but when you're first starting out, you can't you're trying to get more sales. And yes, you want more Bitcoin, but ultimately, if I get paid in dollars, I can convert that to Bitcoin just fine. And I think that there's a bit of like when you spend Bitcoin as a Bitcoiner, you have to view that as boosting the system. You have to view that as use it or lose it when it comes to Bitcoin's ability to scale. And it's a good practice. Like I teach people all the time. Part of so much of what I do is like teaching people how to make their first Lightning payment, giving people their first experience buying something with Bitcoin. And you see that it is easier in a lot of ways. I mean, tapping a card is super easy, but if you're online and you don't want to keep your card saved on like the Google Cards, whatever, scanning a QR code is a hell of a lot easier than putting in the digits.
It's so much faster.
So, yeah. So there's elements where like, yeah, Bitcoin is better. There's elements where Bitcoin is more frustrating at times for spending. And ultimately, I think if you target Bitcoiners, the customer, like you're going to get more Bitcoin sales. And part of it is also that like, if I'm at Steak and Shake, I'm probably less likely to spend Bitcoin than if I'm at a farmer's market and someone accepts Bitcoin, because I want to give Bitcoin to that person. I want them to succeed. I want them to grow. Whereas with Steak and Shake, like they probably have tons of money on their balance sheet. Like they could just go buy Bitcoin. Um, I want a burger and I want to support them, but there's a trade off with my value because I don't spend to replace. I just spend Bitcoin. And so if I'm going to spend Bitcoin, I want to spend it to someone that I am like, you succeed in like the ultimate way. It's my ultimate vote of confidence for them. For a bigger business like Steak and Shake, it's I will support you. Anytime I go get a burger and I have options, I'm going to Steak and Shake. But since I don't have the personal connection, I don't know them. I'm much less likely to actually spend Bitcoin at a Steak and Shake than in a personal perspective. And so, I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth to a degree, but I think that there's just a value prop as a Bitcoiner. What am I getting when I spend my Bitcoin versus dollars? And as a business, like you just want to target that customer that's super loyal. And if they get to know you, if over years, like if I go to Steak and Shake for 5 years and they continue to show that they're super into Bitcoin and like building on that and giving me better options and healthy food, like I'm more likely to spend Bitcoin. But it's that personal
100%.
connection I think is super important as well.
So, all right. So going back, Bitcoin doesn't exist without medium of exchange.
Mhm.
And I think we can agree that Bitcoin matters. We believe that Bitcoin matters to the world. How do we onboard the next 1 million merchants?
Man,
How do we get more folks like Ben Justman in the world?
I mean, it's hard because it's like I said, if you just tell someone to start accepting Bitcoin, they're not going to see immediate returns. And it takes so much education to understand why Bitcoin matters. Like a huge part of it is exiting the hamster wheel. And you don't see a $10 Bitcoin buy as directionally helping you exit the hamster wheel. So it takes education, it takes time, but ultimately, like if there's a way to like show instant positive results. For instance, a friend of mine worked with a cattle company that posted, on Twitter, we added Bitcoin to our balance sheet. Post went viral. Tons of Bitcoiners started buying from them. That's instant results. And then it backed up with data that those customers were more loyal and spent more. So it's like you need this like instant peak marketing phrase to get them going. And then you need the Bitcoiners to actually put up or shut up. Because if I'm standing on the world of like, we need Bitcoin as a medium of exchange we need Bitcoin to be a medium of exchange for it to really exist. Then Bitcoiners are the only people in the world driving that medium of exchange. And as I said, like the Bitcoin itself is not what those companies that are just dipping their toe in are looking at. They want more sales. And if you can convince them to keep a little bit of Bitcoin, keep the Bitcoin that they get paid in, like that's great. And if they just keep getting more touch points from all these Bitcoiners, they'll start getting like curious about Bitcoin and even more so want to accept it, become Bitcoiners themselves. But it's really not about Bitcoin, the asset. It's about Bitcoiners, the customers. If you want to onboard businesses, you need loyal customers, you need turnout, and Bitcoin, the asset, is secondary.
Well, and I think to even just kind of extend on that, Ben, because of what you were saying, where Bitcoiners don't really want to separate with their Bitcoin and they're, they want to give their Bitcoin to people that they want to support. That's a really good feedback loop too, because when you're selling to people and they're paying you in Bitcoin, you can understand like, oh, this customer must really like my product because he or she is willing to separate with something that we think is going to be extremely valuable in the future. Like some people buy their Bitcoin and say, I'm holding this for my grandchildren or for my grandchildren's grandchildren. And that's another thing that it's hard to get that type of I guess honest feedback in the market. Like if it's one thing if you're in a subscription based model and things are growing or not, but it's another to see it as an asset that's also growing. Right? It's not just fiat. It's not just I'm subscribing to this service because like I need my Netflix subscription, but the quality of shows on Netflix has gotten substantially worse while the prices have gone up, mind you. But it's more so they're continuing to pay me in this thing that I understand that there was a real decision that needed to be made of, do I want to separate from my Bitcoin for this product or service? And I think that's really powerful too, from just getting an understanding of like what is good and what is working, and then what is not as well. But Jason, I know you had a question, so I just wanted to add that in there.
Let me just respond to that really quick. I wear two hats. I wear the Ben, the winemaker business runner, and then I wear the Ben, the Bitcoiner hat. And I'm in the thick of it in both. So yes, I totally understand when someone spends Bitcoin, even if they're spending and replacing, they're making a choice to pay me in the thing that I value the most, and that means a lot to me. And so as a Bitcoiner, if I'm going to a business having kind of understood that, and they accept Bitcoin, but they don't appreciate it the way I do, I'm less likely to give that to them, because if you don't appreciate my Bitcoin, why am I giving it to you? Because it's going to be worth so much one day. So yeah, that's like, I'm just kind of pushing on the point of like, it's Bitcoiners, the customers, that are going to get people, not Bitcoin the asset, because Bitcoin the asset takes so much time to understand.
I was just going to summarize. I love, Ben, your push down the marketing path. So many business owners are just trying to grow their business. And the TLDR, from what I heard, is start accepting Bitcoin means more customers. More customers means more sales. More sales means you can save more money. And assuming you do that in Bitcoin, you can start exiting the broken fiat system, which means you will thrive and flourish. Did I get that right?
It also means more touch points to Bitcoiners and more touch points to Bitcoin, which ultimately pushes you down the education rabbit hole. Because that's what matters. The education is what matters. You have to understand what you're holding if you want to get Bitcoin.
I was at a breakout session at a faith-driven investor conference with Jimmy Song, and this is one of the nodes, like the multiple, dots for me for like starting to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And it was like me, Jimmy, and 8 other people. And basically I was like, so I just buy Bitcoin. That's the takeaway from this. Like, and he was like, yeah, but education, like you need to get yourself educated, because, and I didn't know necessarily how to do that in the beginning. Boy, has my world changed since I did that. But yeah, it's a pretty fun journey if you can start getting yourself educated. And it's exciting to see more and more business owners like yourself go down that journey and begin to accept Bitcoin and see people paying in Bitcoin, and how lives can radically change through that process.
Absolutely. And as you highlighted, like, all of what I'm saying is recognizing that education is going to be what makes the difference between a company accepting Bitcoin today and a company accepting Bitcoin or focusing on Bitcoin tomorrow. And there's just got to be positive incentives to bring that customer or bring that business more and more touch points to get them to educate about Bitcoin. Because if you're running a business, you have a million different things going on. Why would I want to learn about this other thing? But if it gets me more sales, I'm more interested in it. So I'll keep learning. And that just takes time. I mean, and also, like, I'm not very bullish on tons of brick and mortar businesses all of a sudden accepting Bitcoin and feeling that. Steak and Shake's huge. It's awesome that they don't always have cashiers, so you can just do it easily and not have to worry about it. But it's obvious for smaller online oriented businesses to start accepting Bitcoin and start marketing to Bitcoiners, but taking that next step is a bigger step. And the Shake and Steak example is something that I'll be watching closely as kind of a benchmark of where are we? Like, if we zoom out, we're all Bitcoiners, we all want it to win, but like, where are we? Are we big enough, Bitcoiners big enough to make a difference for this 450 location brick and mortar burger joint? And if that's the case, I mean, then we're going crazy, but I still got to see that first.
Yeah. I mean, I have one last question, and I think that this kind of, is the on-ramp to hopefully what you were just describing. Once we get to that point of all huge brick and mortars just accepting Bitcoin. But one of the things that I love following along on your socials, both across Twitter and Noster, and you mentioned before that you got introduced to Bitcoin Twitter. and have grown, a following there in the Bitcoin community. Is just you're running kind of thread or two running threads actually of one of all the bottles that you have remaining for your last or I don't know if it's your last, but the amount of bottles for Peony Lane that you have remaining in that harvest, and then also your just do things kind of theme that you've been running on. Can you just kind of riff on those, and like what has been the thought process there, and how has that marketing really played out both with Bitcoiners, and I'm sure there's been a little bit of crossover too with non-Bitcoiners getting some conversation going. But I just love when people have fun with marketing, and it's something that seems pretty simple on the surface, but like there's probably a little bit of a backstory that goes into it as well.
Yeah, I mean, my Twitter presence was not built to at least initially with the mindset of trying to sell wine. It was just learn and have fun. And so that being kind of the baseline of where I started out using Twitter, because I just never used Twitter before Bitcoin. It's definitely like I'm just myself on Twitter, and there's some, I post educational things, I post about wine. And what I'm doing is really just, you can just do things, because I never would have guessed I was where I'm at. Like even a couple years ago, I never would have guessed it would have been all Bitcoin, and started a winery without any experience, built a house without any experience. So yeah, I think my story is a bit of you can just do things. And I think that just resonates with people. But the scarcity part of wine is something that Bitcoiners really can relate to. The most scarce thing in the world is your time, and Bitcoin's absolutely scarce. But the thing that makes wine special is each vintage is different. And so if you like a specific bottle, that bottle will just disappear one day and you can never recreate it. So that's really the only marketing post I've figured out actually works outside of like the long term. Hey, I want to educate people about wine. When you think about wine, you think about me, you buy wine. But the scarcity posts have definitely been working for sales, because when it's gone, and there's nothing you can do. And to speak further into wine scarcity, like, yeah, when a bottle's gone, when a vintage is gone, it's gone. There's nothing you can do. You do replace it with the next vintage, but it's never going to be exactly the same. And also there's the temporal aspect of wine where, if you open a bottle a month from now, it's going to taste slightly different than it does today. And if you have that first glass and then you leave the bottle open for an hour, that second glass is going to taste different. So, and like we all experience things different based off the environment that we're in, the bite of food we took before. So wine is like this both, we think of it as like it gets better with time, but ultimately it just changes. And you're always kind of trying to capture that last moment. And it's so fleeting with each sip being slightly different that it's kind of just a magical way to think about like aging and time preference, and really enjoying those specific high quality moments with the people you love, or great food.
I love it. I gotta get some of your wine, Ben. When I was in Tuscany, I was like, I feel so much better because, to your point from earlier, they don't have all the additives. I'm pumped to get some delicious wine made by an incredible person and Bitcoiner that doesn't have all the additives. Where can we send folks to learn more about you and what you're up to, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I'm primarily on Twitter at Ben Justman, and then on Noster, Ben Justman at primal.net. And that's where most of my stuff is. I also post on LinkedIn, but am primarily on those other two. I have a wine club, and I ship wine all over the United States off my website, peonylanewine.com. Yeah, and I wanted to give an 80-20 on how to find good wine, how to find wine that doesn't make you feel bad. And the first thing, like if the hardcore 80-20, like the lowest hanging fruit, is just buy French or Italian wine. There's a couple other countries, but those are super prevalent and generally have a better winemaking practice than the average wine in the United States. If you go to the store and you buy wine from California and you don't know the producer, you're just buying the wine off the shelf, especially like basically any wine at a grocery store is probably heavily manipulated. It's mass produced. If you go to every state's different. In Colorado, we have liquor stores where everyone buys wine, And there you can ask people about the producer. You kind of just want to ask if they're low intervention or biodynamic and organic are a good sign, but they're these kind of gameable certifications. And organic only really refers to the grape growing and not necessarily the winemaking, which is where a lot of the additives come in. So the best thing you can do is, if you live near winemakers, go meet them and ask them. And boutique wineries, even if they're not labeling themselves as low intervention, they're going to be using a lot less additives than anything bigger that you would just find at the store. So French or Italian, ask the wine guy at the store, and then buy locally and ask questions. I think people ask then, what questions should I ask? If you ask the winemaker, like, hey, I think I might get headaches with sulfites, like, what's your opinion on the use of those? That's probably going to tell you a little bit. There is a bit of defensiveness in winemakers with sulfites specifically, just because they're not technically bad for you. But I think people do have actions, and if you're using a bunch of them, you are more likely to be using other stuff. So bit of an 80-20. Ultimately, I'm here to educate, and if anyone listening to this has further questions, just shoot me a message, and I'm happy to help.
Or make it easy on yourself and go to peonylane.com.
peonylanewine.com.
peonylanewine.com.
That's amazing.
Ben, thank you for joining us, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good to see you, and I hope this continues to go well for you guys.
Thank you.